All right, let's bring in Hoover Institute senior fellow Victor Davis Hanson. Victor, thank you for being with us. We're going to get into Fani Willis in a second, but I want to talk about President Trump. You had the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ orchestrate with the media this Russia collusion. Then you had two impeachments. Then you've had Democrats kick him off the ballot. And now you have all of these cases that are happening around the country. And if you're a Democrat, you have to be really depressed. None of it has worked. Donald Trump is up in the polls. People still love him. It seems like nothing can take down Donald Trump. However, the process of what Democrats are doing here has to be bad for democracy.
It is. Trump has one consistent theme, and that is they are weaponizing the administrative state, they're weaponizing the courts, and they're weaponizing the federal government to achieve a political purpose. They deny it, and then almost every 2 or 3 weeks they prove Trump right. And so all of these cases have two common themes, Sean. They would not have been brought against a liberal politician, and they wouldn't have been brought against Donald Trump if in January 2021 he just said, I'm done with politics, I'm not going to run again. It was all predicated on him possibly being president again.
Victor, it was, though, astonishing watching Fani Willis on the stand. I mean, she stormed into the courtroom after her former lover was done testifying. And there was much discussion about Fani Willis hoarding cash in her house, including some of the money that she used for her first campaign, and then her non-verifiable cash payments to her boohoo for the lavish trips they took. Listen to this.
I've given him cash only a few times in life, probably 4.
Okay.
Probably the most money I've ever handed him is $2,500.
You have no proof of any reimbursement for any of these things because it was all cash, right?
The testimony of one witness is enough to prove a fact.
The only money you've ever given him outside of a contract is cash.
I didn't give him money in a contract, so that was cute, but I didn't give him money outside in a contract. His money back. I don't need anybody to foot my bills. The only man who's ever foot my bills completely is my daddy.
What did you make of what happened? What did you make of that? Well, do you think she'll be disqualified?
Yeah, I do. I don't think you can have the chief prosecutor of one of the largest counties in the United States who's trying a historic case unrivaled in the history of presidential politics, who just flatly admits that she takes out thousands of dollars in cash and then she reimburses her paramour by carrying thousands of dollars of cash along with her and gives him the money back, she says, as a remittance without any confirmation, no written document, no signature. And so I think people who listen to that will say to themselves, well, the only reason that you would pay him back in cash is you didn't want the record of a credit card or a personal check, which would have been far easier and far safer. So why would you pay him back in cash? And her explanation is that she plays the race card again and again, that it's characteristic of black families. Their father instructs young black women to have more money, and et cetera, and that doesn't wash. And it was just ridiculous. Everybody knows why people do things in cash. It's primarily to avoid a written record. And when you're the chief prosecutor in charge of, prosecuting the laws and making sure that you follow jurisprudence, and you're doing that, there has to be a reason why, and she couldn't explain it.
No,
and then when she lost her temper and she conducted herself in a non-professional way, and she was indulged, I thought, really way over the limits of tolerance by the judge. He kept trying to rationalize or contextualize her outrageous behavior. I just think it came off bad, and people are going to say, this person is in charge of prosecuting the leading candidate for the presidency of the United States?
I do want to just point out before Sean picks this up that even her numbers that she recited were not the same. She said at one point on her worst day she had $500 to $1,000 at her house, and on her best day she probably had $15,000. This is in her home. And then later she said $500 to $9,000. So she couldn't even get those stories straight. But all this will do is delay.
Well, Victor, it's one thing to say I can verify because I've taken out tens of thousands of dollars in cash, right? And then you might be able to go, I'll show you bank records to show that I've done that. She doesn't want to show her bank records. And to your point, if you're going to make payments, they could be questioned to your boyfriend who you've hired to prosecute a case, you would want those paid in verifiable transactions, whether it's a check or a Cash App transaction. She didn't do this, but when we talk about what this judge is going to do, I spent 10 years in a courtroom. I was amazed at the latitude that this judge gave her to go on rampages and diatribes and make accusations. And every other judge I've seen would have constrained a witness to answer the questions that were asked. This judge didn't do that. He seemed to have a shine for her, and this judge, he's a human being, is going to make the decision on whether she stays in the case or does not. And the way he treated her today makes me think he's probably going to side with her. You disagree?
I agree entirely, and you have to put it in a larger context. Unfortunately, we had Judge Kaplan in the E. Jean Carroll case basically saying that Donald Trump was a rapist, even though he conceded he was never convicted of rape, but sexual assault, which did not include rape. And then we had Judge Ergogon in the Letitia James courtroom that was just blatantly on the side of the prosecution against Donald Trump. And they all have a common theme. They're all in big cities, blue states, blue cities, liberal jury pools, liberal judges, liberal prosecutors, many of whom have advertised in their campaign literature or blatantly in their campaign stump speeches that they want to get Donald Trump. And then the other shocking thing is we have these parallel cases where we have Joe Biden suddenly saying that he came forward and said that he had classified documents on November 2nd, and then we learn that he had them maybe for 30 years, but specifically he was notified and said so in an audio in 2017 and never notified anybody, but we're supposed to congratulate him for notifying finally on November 2nd, 2 weeks before he has his Attorney General appoint a special prosecutor to go after Donald Trump for the very same things he's done. So all of these are interconnected and they're a travesty, and I just hope that the American people look at it and won't stand for it.
On that note, here's what Matt Taibbi had to say, the race for the White House being played out in court. And it's touching on what you just said, Victor. Every candidate but the true criminal himself is in the crosshairs of the courts. Listen to this.
Normally at this time of year, the media is intensely interested in what voters think. This year, all of the key battles are going to be taking place in courtrooms. We had the Supreme Court hearing last week about the Colorado case. There were complaints just filed about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. There's an ongoing battle to keep the no labels third party off the ballot in multiple states. The possibility exists that everybody but the major party candidate on the Democratic side will face very, very serious legal challenges ahead of this vote.
Not a coincidence.
No, and what I would add an addendum to that is that the major party candidate and his legions who are doing that have more criminal exposure than the people they're going after. If you look at the Biden family and the preposterous defense that Hunter's giving, saying that that may or may not be true, the contents of the laptop, but I think I'm being defamed by him, but I don't really admit that they're mine. And then you look at the sweetheart deal they tried to pull off with his IRS exposure. And then you look at the whole Bobulinski testimony the other day, and it's just obvious. It's as obvious as the cash payments of Fannie Willis. Hunter Biden had no ability to make money overseas unless he could sell his father's name. His father's name could not be sellable unless it had a reputation for a quid pro quo deliverance, like firing Victor Shokin and things like that. And it's obvious. There's no other reason that they made so much money other than Joe Biden's willingness to do things in exchange for payments to his family. And yet that side is using lawfare against everybody else as a sick sort of projection, I guess.
No doubt about that, and it is tough for democracy. I want to move to this, Victor, from open borders to fentanyl to flooding the streets. and violent crimes, foreign wars. It's hard to believe that the left still believes in leftism. You wrote an article called "Do Leftists Now Believe Leftism Doesn't Work?" And again, we've seen homelessness and drug use and crime in the streets. Is the left actually realizing that their policies don't work, and are they coming back to the center?
No.
Oh, that wasn't for you. That's for Victor.
No, they're doing it. Yeah, they're just doing it because it's an election year. So we're pumping. Now all of a sudden we're pumping more oil than we did during the Trump administration.
Right.
In an election year, and suddenly they want to close the border in an election year, and suddenly they're talking about crime in an election year, and that's what it's about. If he were to be elected, they would reduce petroleum production again. And they wouldn't worry about the border. They let in another 8 or 10 million. It's only an election year they feign this idea. But the problem they're having is their core constituencies are starting to see it doesn't work. And they are worried about that they don't like the crime, they don't like the border, they don't like deliberately cutting back on energy, they don't like what's happening overseas. And they're aware of that. And their main common theme for all, they want power, and they want to hold it, and they'll do anything to maintain it, and whatever that takes.
I can only hope, Victor, that they would change the course, but I guess election year, yes, but the other 3 years before a presidential race, not so lucky. Victor Davis Hanson, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for being with us on The Bottom Line. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Great to see you, always.